There are some places around the world that even today are completely abandoned for one reason or another, whether it's because they were wiped off the face of the earth or simply moved elsewhere. Sometimes these places can be visited, but it's always best to leave them alone as much as possible, because no one wants to accidentally disturb something that's long gone. But that's not always the case, though, is it? Because sometimes there are places so strange that even to this day, we don't know what happened to them. And one of those places is known as the lost village of Lake Anjikuni. If you want to hear more stories about paranormal activity, then be sure to subscribe. But for now, let's take a look at the lost village of Lake Anjikuni. In the 1930s, a small Inuit village existed in northern Canada. The settlement was called Anjikuni, meaning where the caribou are, or meeting place. The remote community thrived with some 200 residents living in relative peace. However, in February of 1930, disaster struck the community. Overnight, it was found that the village had completely vanished. Gone were the cozy homes and people who had inhabited the area only days before. And the most shocking part was that nothing indicated that the town had been deserted. It wasn't as though everyone had suddenly decided to pick up and move somewhere else. There was no indication of migration or violence within the settlement. And the most important of all, no corpses could be found anywhere. It was almost as if the entire population had disappeared into thin air. With no evidence left behind, authorities had to piece together what had happened based on the clues they did have. And the first thing they discovered was that the last sighting of the townspeople had been more than a week earlier. A trapper named Joe LaBelle had stopped by the village on his way back from a trading trip and found everything in order. Days later, he came across the bodies of 2 missing hunters, confirming that something unusual was happening in the region. At the time, cannibalism was a common practice among the locals, so the fact that no corpses were found was odd. Even stranger was the state of the remaining buildings. Food was found in some of the houses, still warm and good to eat, and many of the homes had blankets over their residents' beds, as if they had just stepped out for the day and never come back. What's more, several dogs were found tied up outside the homes, showing that the inhabitants hadn't abandoned their loyal pets. As if that wasn't enough, explorers also found tracks leading away from the settlement, which showed no signs of struggling or a hasty retreat. After days of searching, no trace of the villagers or their graves could be found. It was as if the entire community had evaporated. To this day, the disappearance of the 200 villagers remains one of Canada's greatest mysteries. There have been various theories regarding what may have caused such a bizarre occurrence, ranging from natural disasters to government cover-ups. However, none of these theories have been proven, leaving us with more questions than answers. What could have caused such a large group of people to vanish without a trace? Did they suddenly decide to migrate elsewhere? Was it a natural disaster? Or was there something more sinister at play? We may never know for sure. But here's the thing. One man refused to believe that. After hearing about the mysterious incident, James Bartle decided to visit the site and find out for himself what had happened. Armed with nothing but his camera, he set off into the barren landscape and soon came across Lake Anjikuni. As he stood on the frozen surface of the lake, he began to experience strange things. First, he started to notice strange flickering lights coming from all directions. At first, he thought that they were simply reflections of the sun, but as he continued to film, he noticed that they were getting closer. Suddenly, a voice could be heard calling out to him from the darkness. Startled, he turned to see what was there, but saw nothing. When he looked back at the camera screen, he could have sworn he saw the shadow of a person. As he continued to explore the area, he came across a number of abandoned huts, each containing food and blankets, just as if the inhabitants had just stepped out for the day. All of a sudden, one of the huts began to shake violently, and what sounded like screams could be heard coming from inside. Bartle cautiously approached the hut and peered through a crack in the wall. What he saw inside shocked him. There in front of him were several shadowy figures moving around the hut. They seemed to be agitated and were making strange noises. Bartle watched in awe as they began to gather around him, their eyes fixed on him. He tried to run, but their eyes seemed to be holding him in place. As they closed in, he could feel their icy cold breath on his neck. Then everything went black. When Bartle came to, he found himself lying on the ground next to the hut. Disoriented and confused, he stumbled back, knocking over a nearby rock. As he reached down to pick it up, he noticed something strange. Etched into the rock was a symbol that he had seen on the ground outside the hut. Suddenly, he realized that he had stumbled upon something truly terrifying. He had found the lair of the creatures responsible for the disappearance of the villagers. But what were they, and what did they want with him? As he continued to explore the area, he came across more and more symbols, each one more disturbing than the last. Some depicted strange creatures with sharp teeth and claws, while others showed humanoid figures with glowing eyes. He realized that he was walking in the footsteps of the villagers who had disappeared years ago. They had encountered the same creatures and had met the same fate. Bartle knew that he had to escape, but the creatures must have sensed his presence because suddenly the forest came alive. From the shadows, the creatures began to emerge. Their eyes glowed with an eerie light, and their teeth glistened in the darkness. Bartle ran for his life, crashing through the underbrush, desperate to get away. But the creatures were fast, and they were relentless. They closed in on him, their voices echoing through the trees. Just when he thought they had caught up with him, he stumbled into a clearing and collapsed in exhaustion. As the creatures approached, he looked up to see their faces contorted in a snarl. They loomed over him, their eyes boring into his. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, they vanished into the shadows. Bartle was shaken to his core. He had escaped, but he knew that he would never forget what he had seen. The creatures were real, and they were watching him. Determined to uncover the truth, he returned home and pored over his footage. What he saw on the screen made his blood run cold. As he watched, he could have sworn he saw himself among the vanished villagers, waving to him from beyond the grave. He had stumbled upon something truly terrifying, and he knew that he would never be the same again. So what do you think really happened to the people of Lake Anjikuni? If you enjoyed this chilling tale and want to hear more stories like it, be sure to hit that like button and share it with your friends. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an upload. With that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.